county boundary between Suffolk and Norfolk lies here. Hopton was in Suffolk until the boundaries were changed a few years ago. The enclosure contained a wartime radar station, now dismantled. The church burned down in 1865 and sensibly was rebuilt further inland. Hopton was originally just a fishing village, but now, like most villages around the coast, depends on the holiday industry. Here is Gorleston Golf Club. In Norfolk, there are several golf clubs on the cliff tops. These grew just like the holiday camps when leisure time became the norm. The overall picture of the Norfolk coast will be one of much more development than in Suffolk, but still there is an alarming amount of coastal erosion. The detached houses along the front at Gorleston occupy prime sites. They were built mainly in the 1930s and 50s. Traditionally, Yarmouth pilots bringing the ships through the sandbanks at the harbour entrance and up the river lived in Old Gorleston. Ships today still need a pilot to bring them into this harbour. Yarmouth Harbour with a lifeboat station and coastguard buildings on the South Pier. Brig and Thames barges, luggers and drifters all tied up at the quays. Now the port is used mainly by supply vessels servicing the North Sea oil industry. From an aircraft, it's easy to see that the South Denes is a large sandpit. In pre-Roman times, it was covered with the sea. It's entirely industrial now, but at one time there was an airfield here, a seaplane base, and a race course. At least one Zeppelin was shot down, and Alan Cobham gave pleasure flights from here in the 1930s. You might just spot Nelson's column in this complex. It predated the Trafalgar Square one by 23 years. It's in a sorry state of repair now, and Britannia stands at the top and is facing towards the river rather than the sea, because it was from the river that Yarmouth's prosperity came. Behind the bright blue scenic railway of the pleasure beach stands the yellow brick Royal Naval Hospital behind the bright green square. Here Nelson visited men wounded in the battles of the Nile and Copenhagen. It's flats and houses now. The short Wellington Pier, with winter gardens built in the 1850s, the fishing jetty, the marina and the Britannia Pier are all along Yarmouth's Golden Mile. Behind the seafront is an old town whose medieval walls are almost still intact, and Yarmouth's famous rows with houses so close you could lean out of a window and touch hands with your opposite neighbour. The waterways where miniature motorboats can be driven round islands, under bridges and through landscape gardens. It was built as an unemployment project in the 1920s. There's a tern colony on the North Denes protected by the RSPB during the breeding season, which is from May until August. Yarmouth Racecourse. It moved here from the South Denes in 1920, and next to it the golf course. Behind them, North Denes Airfield, where helicopters fly in and out to service the North Sea rigs. The birth of the holiday camp took place here at Caister. A lifelong socialist, J. Fletcher Dodd, thought it would be a good idea to combine a holiday village with opportunities for political discussion. The red shed of the Caister lifeboat. A brave rescue attempt in 1904 resulted in the drowning of 9 lifeboat men and gave rise to the claim that Caister men never turn back. It is a complicated story, but there is a sad and interesting memorial to the men in Caister churchyard. Near the Caister water tower is the site of a Roman town. The Romans were here for several hundred years. The widening out of the beach is a mark of the success of the newly established reefs. The granite blocks have lessened the force of the waves at this vulnerable place. Stones are placed at the base of the cliffs to try to prevent further undercutting. The California Beach Company had an advantage. Their lookout was on the top of the cliffs, so they could spot ships in distress on the sandbanks earlier than their rivals along the coast. The curious name arises from the fact that shortly before the colony set up, some 16th century gold coins were found in the mud at the base of the cliffs. This was in the 1840s, at the height of the California gold rush. A beach colony from Winterton created Newport, part of the holiday industry now, but previously a fishing village. Fishing and farming were the main occupations along this coast, and many farm lads worked on the Yarmouth trawlers and drifters in the winter when work on the land was slack. Coming up to Hemsby now, and on the skyline the tall wind turbines at Somerton. There are 11 of them. 10 were installed in 1992, each providing 225 kilowatts of electricity, 30 metres tall with blades 13 metres long and a life of 25 years. A taller one still was added in the year 2000. It cost 1.3 million and the blades alone weigh 5 tons each. There's been much controversy about their sightings in such an environmentally sensitive area. Winterton Church Tower, exceptionally high at 130 feet, and the lighthouse closer to the beach. The dunes offer some protection to the village. In the 1860s, Winterton men skippered at least 6 of the lifeboats along the coast, and they were credited with saving at least 500 lives. The Coast Guard's lookout at Winterton Dunes National Nature Reserve owned by English Nature. The area provides habitats for reed and sedge warblers, whitethroats, chiffchaffs, reindeer moss, sorrel and rare natterjack toads, but do watch out for adders. Somewhere here the River Thurne used to flow into the sea, but its exit became silted up and it now flows in a southwesterly direction and joins the River Bure 6 miles inland. This land is largely unprotected by the sea, and much of it lies below sea level between here and Munsley. On January the 31st, 1953, a combination of high tide and gale-force winds caused a huge sea surge in which lives were lost, houses smashed, and thousands of acres of good agricultural land were submerged under damaging salt water. As a result of that night, these coastal defences were built largely in the form of concrete seawalls and concrete groins, but now, 50 years on, some of these are beginning to crumble. Horsey Gap, where the sea broke through in 1953. Horsey Mere, only 1 mile away, is the closest place the Norfolk Broads gets to the sea, and this proximity makes the whole of Broadland vulnerable. This stretch of coast is quite empty, save for the occasional farmhouse and a caravan park. There's a public footpath along the sea edge to Waxham. This land below sea level causes special concern. Coastal submergence began about 500 BC and reversed about 700 AD. It's thought that water levels will probably rise again by up to 165 centimetres by the end of the next century, making present-day sea defences even more important. The church and buildings ahead are all to the left of Waxham, the rest have been claimed by the North Sea. To the left of the church is Waxham Great Barn, the longest barn in Norfolk, 176 feet, built in 1581. From the air, it is easy to see the effects of the new reefs. They were built by the Environment Agency about 100 yards offshore. A few years ago here at Sea Pauling, a village especially badly hit by the 1953 floods, 9 people were drowned. The reef's purpose is to break the force of the waves to protect the soft soil of the coast. The beach here is now reclaimed, and at low tide it's possible to walk across the sand to them. The huge granite boulders were imported from Norway. Although the scheme was very costly, it seems to be addressing the problem. Eccles North Gap. The entrances onto the beach are referred to as gaps and were made by the fishing community to allow their boats to be pulled onto the sand. Eccles Bush Estate is a collection of holiday bungalows built in the 30s. The original Eccles village was devastated by a sea surge in 1604. The rebuilt village was swept away again in 1895. The rubble of the church tower can sometimes be found still on the beach at low tide. Cart Gap Eccles. Where the seawall ends, erosion begins again. Haysborough Lighthouse with 2 coastguard cottages at its base. Haysborough Churchyard contains the graves of shipwrecked sailors, including 119 of the crew of HMS Invincible, wrecked on the Haysborough Sands in 1803. Here also, 3 German airmen from World War II are buried, and there's shrapnel embedded in the church. Here, the coastal ridge begins and continues all the way to Sheringham. The hamlets of Ostend, Walcott and Keswick merge. They are all that remains of the lost villages. At Walcott Gap, the road runs very close to the sea wall and is closed by the police when the seas are too rough. The launch ramp is usable only in settled weather. One mile inland from Bacton village is Bromholme Priory, in the Middle Ages one of the holy places of Europe and mentioned in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Bacton Gas Terminal, opened in 1968. The first gas piped ashore was from the Lehman Field, the then largest known gas field in the world. The masts are 500 feet high. Gas is piped from the fields up to 65 miles away, and in 1998 the Duke of Edinburgh came to open a gas pipeline to Zeebrugge. On the outskirts of Munsley is the former corn grinding stow mill with sails and fantail still intact. Munsley was listed in the Domesday Book. It stands on both sides of the diminutive River Mund. The red roof at the foot of the cliff houses the inshore rescue boat, and in the summer it gets called out 10 to 12 times a day. At the top of the slope is the Coast Guard lookout. When the railway came, Munsley became a resort and large red brick Victorian hotels appeared along the sea front. The straight line of the now disused Midland and Great Northern Railway shows a straight hedge line in the background, and the M&GM was affectionately known as the Muddle and Go Nowhere. Since 1968, the coastline from Munsley to Snettisham has been designated an area of outstanding natural beauty. A beacon stood here on the cliff top. The cliffs have changed from sand to chalk and sand. The radar dome at Trimmingham is part of our defence system. The cliffs here are the highest along the Norfolk coast. Here the countryside changes character. It is more wooded, and there are several large country estates and substantial seaside houses built for the rich. Side Strand is the start of Poppy Land, the name invented by Daily Telegraph journalist Clement Scott, who popularised the area in the 1890s. Poppies seed in abundance on arable land, which is ploughed regularly. Overstrand, the suffix strand means beach. Homes are still being lost due to the ongoing erosion, and the chalky cliffs have been repaired with granite stones. Sir Edward Lutyens built a couple of large houses for wealthy clients here, Overstrand Hall and the Pleasurance, now a Christian holiday home. There is a public footpath along the coastal edge of the Royal Cromer Golf Course. Cromer Lighthouse on the cliffs. Past the lighthouse, the footpath descends into Cromer itself. The old part of the town is huddled round the beach, and the church has the highest tower in Norfolk, 160 feet, which made it an exceptionally good lookout. Here, the boats go out to catch Cromer crabs. 6 years ago, the pier was sliced in two by a breakaway barge, but repaired in time for the next summer season. A new lifeboat station stands at the end. There's also an inshore rescue boat along the promenade. Coxswain Henry Blogg became a national hero and received more awards and decoration than any lifeboat man before or since. The Weaver's Way footpath ends here, having covered 56 miles of countryside from Great Yarmouth. The still functioning railway line between Cromer and Sheringham runs through the split parish of Runton East and West. Although from the coast, the Runtons appear mainly to house caravans, there are older dwellings inshore and evidence that there has been a settlement here since the first millennium. But the remains of an even older inhabitant have been discovered. The West Norfolk elephant became world news in 1991. Some walkers on the beach discovered the bones of a prehistoric elephant, Britain's oldest fossil. The 10-ton beast, as big as a double-decker bus, was dug out of the cliffs. It lived about 600,000 years ago. The skeleton has been removed to the Norwich Castle Museum, where lottery funding is making it possible to study and reconstruct it. It is hoped eventually to have it on display. Sheringham is divided into two parts, upper and lower. The inhabitants of the lower Sheringham are nicknamed Shannocks. Many of them went to sea in double-ended fishing boats in search of crabs and lobsters and lived in the little cottages by the driftway. But Sheringham suffered the fate of many other fishing villages and became a popular holiday resort when the railway came in 1887. The population doubled in the following 20 years. The railway still runs from Sheringham to Hull through Weybourne, but only in the summer. It is now called the North Norfolk Railway or the Poppy Line. There are still a few boats at Sheringham, but the shifting coastline has made the beach steeper, and beaching a boat is difficult. Sheringham also had the dubious distinction of being the first place in England to be bombed from the air. In January 1915, a Zeppelin mistook it for Grimsby. The aircraft is about to turn towards the National Trust, heath and the woodland at Roman Camp. Nothing whatsoever to do with the Romans, but iron workings from the Saxon period and the Middle Ages have been found there. It's fitting that this aerial film concludes over Beacon Hill. At 340 feet, it's the highest point in Norfolk.